the desk will be 0-2 or today because they're all preding the Shock, and look how well that started off today. I honestly don't know what I would pred for this one.
I mean, it's been a bad tournament for Pick'ems, let's be real. Like, last week was a dumpster fire when it comes to Preds. This week has not fared much better to begin with. Lemon, we've got to look at the starting roster, of course, because we have ourselves 2 star-studded rosters, and we're opening up with the San Francisco Shock. And, of course, when you talk about the Shock, you've got to talk about the star rookie on this roster. Proper game into this week with some amazing Genji stats, and only reinforced them in their previous match where Proper was getting ace after ace, and that led to a lot of little happy dances.
Of course, yeah, I like the happy throw too. But that's the other team. But when it comes to the Proper versus Genji, I mean, this is the matchup I'm looking forward to. At number 1, though, is Kevster when it comes to being at the top of the rankings in hero damage. But right behind him, barely a gap of 200 damage on average, is Proper's Genji. Both having almost the same amount of time. Maybe in previous metas, Proper would lean a little bit more into the Tracer. But really, both of these players are vying for their individual awards. Whether Rookie of the Year, MVP, whatever it may be. This is going to be the most exciting series of the day.
Indeed it will be, Lemon. Let's have a look at the 0-2, but 2-0 when it comes to titles gained in Overwatch League this season, LA Gladiators. And of course, he's so fresh out of the oven, but we don't even have a Gladiators picture of him yet, Lemon. Happy is in.
At least not a picture not in purple. Yep, he's been picked up and found a new home. And I was asking if Reiner was gonna have another upper deck to put on his face today. Last time it was Jake, and now he's got a new one. But yeah, when kind of talking to Gladiators, like, why Happy? Aren't they already stacked as it is? But Happy brings a whole new level of Sojourn play, especially with Patapan having his wrist injury. Gladiators were looking for someone to truly dominate and be as aggressive as the rest of the team is on Sojourn, and Happy is just that. And he gets to debut in the very first match, so no warm-up time, Happy's in.
I mean, it might be a little bit of a nothing burger, but this is also Happy's second match in this meta against the San Francisco Shock. He previously played it with the Washington Justice, and that was alarmingly close. Admittedly, last week, San Francisco Shock still had a couple of holes in their plans that really needed to be tightened up, and it seems from their previous match this week that San Francisco Shock have had some very productive scrims. On the other side, though, definitely looking over towards Reiner and Skewed to play more as a unit this week. I think that they were fairly easily exploitable, and we saw pretty high deaths from Reiner from these two splitting up now and then.
And just looking at, you know, qualifying for the Summer Showdown, which we usually never question if these two teams will make it. But yeah, it's Gladiators are 0-2. They don't even know if they're gonna make it yet. Even the desk kind of predicted that you have to get at least like 3 wins. And after this match, if Gladiators don't win, they only have 3 matches left, and it's against Paris, Atlanta, and Toronto. So do you really want a chance having to guarantee a flawless win against all of those teams? Gladiators really need a win today, while Shock are undefeated.
Yeah, of course, this is a standalone tournament, our Summer Showdown, going down in Toronto. Tickets now available, Smile. And that means for Los Angeles Gladiators, their previous record, it means nothing when it comes to qualifying for this tournament. Speaking of records, San Francisco Shock are on the precipice of having, or at least equaling, the longest ever season record for wins previously set by the Vancouver Titans in 2019. Los Angeles Gladiators want to stand between this iteration of the San Francisco Shock and glory. And for me in particular, I'm watching to see how Gladiators manage their shouts here, in particular because movement is so important in the first point of control, and getting that better positioning to try and force out resources from your opponent.
Yeah, and then when it comes to this point of boost on Sanctuary, it's so open. You have these 4 pillars you can kind of dance around, including the central drum, which kind of acts as your half of the ice if we're playing hockey here. And you can already see that Shock have been taking control of the mini pack side on the opposite. Still a very open area where they can set up Kilo. On top of the drum throw is Proper, who's taking some damage, but left alone was Kilo, who found a charged up shot into Funny Astro. Without that speed, Gladiators are not left with a great engage tool besides the shout from Reiner, who might want to save that for a disengage, but as Proper approach to deal with Reiner without the speed, he gets axed on, and Shock are down 2, Gladiators without a tank. But Shock still managed to get the cap out through all of that.
Yeah, Funny Astro has returned. Kalu has to expend the shout here for the additional health, and now it's going to be a quick disengage for additional movement speed. San Francisco Shock are coming back, but just as quickly, Lemon, Kalu just sent to the graveyard.
Kilo's already have to use a shift jump, and that was in response to Kevster starting his dive. And that's what Kevster wants to do, is just either harass Proper or Kilo, or coalesce onto the tanks and supports when Gladiators make that call. There's so many choices, and it's all about coordination. Speaking of which, everyone rallying behind Skewed and this ult, give them a bit of extra overhealth, and Kevster is dangerously low. That is a win condition Gladiators are hoping for. Soundbearing engage, though, from Shock to finish off this fight, as there was only 3 or maybe 4 members of the Gladiators even left, which might mean a huge play for Kevster in the next fight.
I can't believe it, but that was legitimately a Lucio survival diff against Funny Astro, who's only 70% of the way to ultimate right now, because he's been picked twice by Kilo. That's such an important pick to get as well, because for a second that your team loses for Lucio, you no longer have control of these engagements, because you're trying to save your commanding shout to save your team when they get rushed on. But San Francisco Shock, they have 2 speed boosts that are up at all those moments. Now Gladiators, can they extract value from this blade? Because Violet's used his barrier.
Well, Happy's using overclock, so as soon as Kevster gets people low or vice versa, they can work together to just shred the Shock apart, which, I mean, Gladiators are doing just that. Now, Kilo overclocked himself, but that only takes care of Kevster, and he kills Happy too, but no matter how much deadlifting Kilo is doing, he doesn't have any friends to even go to the point.
Kilo having a series, though, Lemon, that is, that's a scary proposition for the LA Gladiators, because when San Francisco Shock have both of their DPS in carry mode, it's incredibly hard to try and go even with them. That's why you've brought in someone like Happy, who's a world-renowned hit scan talent. Funny Astro, he has an advantage on the sound barrier, but the question is, does he want to get aggressive and tempo rush into San Francisco Shock, or wait to try and deal with the threat Kaluj is going to present with the Rampage?
Yeah, it kind of depends how good your ult tracking is. If Kaluj is very close, I would definitely want to keep the sound barrier for that. But because how open this map is, you can try to position away from it. And that's what Shock tried to do. They all spread apart so that Reiner's Rampage only hits Kaluj and Kilo. And they're playing and Shock are playing hyper passive to just heal back up so that Rampage didn't buy anything. As Gladiators use the sound barrier on top and have only netted themselves 1 pick, but this is a big knife pull on the Kaluj, and that's a 5-on-3 for Glad. As with this fight win, should be able to even things up.
I like that Reiner's being pretty patient with his knife pulls as well, not instantly using them the second that they get embedded, giving a moment for Kalush to start disengaging so that that momentum can be stopped by the pull afterwards, and potentially a better angle when Reiner starts to move around that target Junker Queen. Now, though, coming into this fight, San Francisco Shock have a Rampage, and that's a huge advantage. So Gladiators, they aren't in a great position to win this fight. What they need to do, though, is not get this point capped away from them too early.
Oh, there's the speed, the Rampage right into the Gladiators. It only hits Funny Astro and Happy. Skewed's rally was still into effect, but Funny Astro just got finished off by Proper, and that's how quick he is with these executions. Now you got a queen-on-queen action on the point, and Reiner is gone, so Glads won't be able to hold on to the point.
But critically there, Gladiators didn't lose the point too early. Now they're going to be able to go into the next fight with a couple of tools, namely the Blade from Kevster, but it is going to be answerable by Violet. The question here is, can Los Angeles Gladiators move fast enough onto Violet, who's likely going to be playing closer towards the backline, to try and force an Ajax beat?
Well, there is the shout and the immediate collapse on the Reiner with the barrier engaged from Violet, and Proper is cutting off the ankles of everyone from Glads who are running past him. Funny Astro still got the touch. Here's Kevster with the blade, but he's got no one else around him. And that is the end of that. What a first round, though. 100-94 for the Shock.
I love that Shock there realized that the only way they don't really win that fight is if Violet somehow doesn't get the sound barrier off. So they actually make a really early engage, using that commanding shout to give an extra buffer of health to Violet while he's casting the sound barrier to make sure he can't be killed during that cast. Then it's simply washing over LA Gladiators like a wave, and Gladiators don't really have too much room to start disengaging there because they're starting to hit walls. They are starting to be moved into their own territory where you're going back to spawn one way or the other. San Francisco Shock, they've done a really good job in these opening fights of hunting down Funny Astro and exploiting his more aggressive playstyle. And maybe Funny Astro here needs to be much more mindful about peaking Kilo.
We'll see now on Mecha Base, it's the battle for the high ground. Skewed playing pretty far forward. Usually Brigidas want to be as passive as they can. You go for the whip shot, use the shield bash to only really disengage, never go for the Junker Queen, especially without the stun in Overwatch 2. Proper's already dashed up in the back, has found Happy, and the shift jump not even being baited out. But as the Gladiators went back to peel for Happy, Reiner just took way too much pressure, and without that tank, there's just free damage into the back line. A Shock want to farm for more ult charge, and with that, we'll get the point cap first.
At the start of the match, I was talking about how I wanted Reiner and Skewed to be far more in sync than they were last week, and that's a huge example of a desynced Brig and Junker Queen duo. Skewed, like you said, moving back, having to peel for Happy after Proper gets super aggressive, and that isolates Reiner. Proper's creating mental space by distracting Skewed.
Let's see if Glads can even make it through this choke. Kevster does. He might still have the dash, but he's getting booped to Narnia, and I think that boop just guaranteed Proper the kill. And with this 5-on-4, Shock are just not going to let go of this choke, and so much so that Proper is dashed into this room, which is super dangerous, and he's even gonna blade. I mean, Shock could have just held the choke and got free time, but this blade is not going to get much when Gladiators are this close to spawn.
Reiner resetting off the edge. I might have actually made him die more slowly than if he had just taken the blade. Of course, dying to blade damage doesn't grant ult charge, so Reiner's just like, you'll never take me alive kind of energy. Happy almost has the overclock here, and admittedly is far outpacing Kilo, but still will have to try and carve through Finn, who has the rally available. And Finn here can take a tempo rally because he's outpacing Skewed significantly.
Shock let go of the choke, so Gladiators almost made it through the bridge, and Proper is just only focusing down Kevster, but that means free space for Happy and the overclock. But Shock hit on the high ground, so not the greatest of LOS for Happy to get actually any kills with. So Gladiators have the high ground. Shock disengaged to the point, 70%, and without Finn, Shock have to make a decision. Do they want to use the barrier to conserve their control? But the decision is made too late, and not at all, as Gladiators will finish off the fight and get their first few percentage points of the round.
That kind of dive from Happy is very much a veteran versus rookie kind of dichotomy, where the veteran's like, I've been playing Overwatch League for like 4 years now. I don't choke in these scenarios. I'm going to try and intimidate this rookie player. And admittedly, Kilo doesn't hit the shots right there, but it is a 2 versus 1. I love the plays for intimidation though from Happy, as Kilo's actually hiding out on this off angle, ready to crunch in afterwards. But Shocker having a little bit of time to figure out how they want their rotation to work at the moment, maybe contemplating what ultimates Gladiators have to try and engage this fight, such as the blade in the hands of Kevster. Violet's going to have to beat that.
So Glads think everyone from Shock is through, and the sound bear from Violet hits, but not before the Kevster blade has already struck 2. And Shock, meanwhile, didn't even have Kilo in this fight, because Kilo was trying to take an off angle, or at least come out of the door late, even just sit in the doorway to get picks. So Kilo not being in that fight made a huge difference in the damage levels, as Glads will continue to hold the choke.
And Gladiators there, they did lose Kevster, but that's the risk they ran when they take a blade without any support ultimate behind it, because Funny Astro saving his own barrier, knowing that it needs to be used to deal with Kaluj and the Rampage, which is going to be the main offensive tool.
Off angle from Kilo on the bridge with the overclock, but again, it's so tough to hit on this high ground with those 2 barriers there. And besides the 1 kill, Shock can still work with this though. 5-on-4, they'll get the quick flip on the point, meaning 80% plus is coming down to last fight that Shock need to win, and they have Rampage.
This is a huge take. Oh, Proper falls early though. Skewed, the whip shot. Demon gets rid of him, and now it's Rampage versus Rampage.
And Reiner's trying to dodge the one that just came his way from Kaluj, and that's 3 hit from Glads. Funny Astro keeps the barrier up. Meanwhile, Gladiators conserve their Rampage, and they got the point back, which means this choke push is going to be difficult for the Shock against that ult.
Okay, great restraint there from Reiner to not use the Rampage when it was going to be last fight. San Francisco Shocker now down on a major tool, and they're going to have to try and break into Gladiators' own territory with no tools to do it. The Rampage could take us to a 3rd and final stage of Busan.
Oh, this has to be big, and it does. Finn and Kaluj. Violet finished off by the Happy overclock, and all damage is raining down on the Shock as the Gladiators have a flawless team kill, and with this fight win, will be sending us into round 3.
All right, the full touch on the spawn doors. Los Angeles Gladiators, we talked about on the Watchpoint desk, after that interview with Backbone, customers talking about how important it is to have a team that are all there having a laugh, because that happiness and that merriment, that mirth, it transfers to the lobby, and Los Angeles Gladiators doing that team push onto the spawn doors. I think it gives us a little bit of an insight that they've got the Hunter in them, you know? They got that Hunter in their spirits. Los Angeles Gladiators now, once again, going to look to replicate this performance for San Francisco Shock. I believe they've won every first fight so far. Opening picks was first on Funny Astro. Afterwards, it was on Reiner because Skewed got pulled back by Proper's aggression. I'd love to see Kevster do more to kind of mark Proper in a 1 versus 1.
Yeah, we'll keep track of just what are the Genji's prioritizations, because there's so many different missions that they can take. Kevster's on the high ground, which means he can access to just someone like Finn, or if he wants to just dive and execute Proper, but Happy finds the shot first, and it's an all-out brawl where Reiner and Kevster are so low. But if Glad get the finish on Finn, Shock won't have the healing to really thrive. But Shock have already picked off Reiner and Kevster, so unless Happy is just gonna get picks on picks while sitting in main, this could be turnable from Glads, but we're left with 3 sitting in the middle of the map for Glads versus 3 from Shock that head to point, so it will be a point cap first from Shock.
Yeah, Reiner falling really hurts. It takes so long for him to get back and doesn't want to run out of spawn using that shout. Now Kaluj in immediate danger. There's a peel coming through.
Kevster just had the dive onto Finn, but Violet got the boop away, and Finn was able to live, and Kevster got punished in the process, so Shock are going to see if they can farm even more. Reiner's already at half health, calling for help by his team, but Skewed was too far away, and Funny Astro tried to peel for him, but it's too late. Shock of 1 second fight.
Shock are doing a really good job here of making sure they put down a peeling disruptor field on top of Kaluj when Reiner feels like he's in an aggressive position, to make sure that Reiner can't really make good on the shouts that he used to get on top of Kaluj afterwards. And that gives more time for Proper to try and find these openings elsewhere. Now Funny Astro and Kevster, they might work as a duo here as a hit squad to try and get rid of Finn early, but Violet's he's outpacing so hard on the barrier.
The barrier engage, that is big, and Shock, can they do more? I mean, even if this doesn't work out, they'll have the rally up soon from Finn. Violet has to be careful of how just the entirety of the Shock are going to enter Mega Pack room. Finn and Skewed both use the rally, but the disruptor shot from Gladiators behind the Shock slowed them enough to get that pick on the Violet. But as Gladiators approach, they just are getting run over by Kalush, who got like 2 or 3 kills that fight. So Shock are on their way to a flawless downtown hold.
I thought that maybe Reiner getting that mega health pack control might have been the turnaround that Gladiators needed. Yes, Violet falls down, but San Francisco Shock, they're already in an engagement position. They don't need the additional speed. They have the shout to move on forward. Now Proper has himself a blade. This can force out Astro's barrier, and Kaluj afterwards can put this map to bed.
Gladiators also have to think about touching, which means just naturally playing on the low ground. Proper dashes into the backline, but a well-timed barrier from Astro might have just saved Happy's life, and he needs the time to pull off this overclock, but Proper gets the last laugh. It came down to the final slash versus the overclock, but it doesn't matter. The Shock just took too much damage in that fight, and the Gladiators are still alive.
Still alive. Barely breathing though, Lemon. 1 fight is all that San Francisco Shock need. Now the question is, do they take a trash fight here? Do they take a fight with no ultimates to try and draw something out of Gladiators and risk Gladiators getting closer to support ultimates that could counter Kaluj's Rampage, which is their main tool?
Now the shout's already been used from Shock. That means an open blade from Kevster, and the speed is called from Astro as Gladiators surge forward and shred every mince of meat left of the Shock, and the Gladiators still have tons of work yet to go if they want to take the map.
Good macro fight economics there, though. From the San Francisco Shock, don't use anything. Kevster uses the blade, and Violet is getting ever closer towards this sound barrier, which will mean that Kaluj will be basically invincible when he uses his Rampage, but of course Reiner is going to be able to strike first. Oh,
trigger pulled first by Kaluj, a 3-man Rampage. How do the Gladiators respond? They just disengage and try to use the Inspire healing to heal back up, but during this moment where Gladiators were in Mega Pack, Shock flipped the point. Now the weight is on the Gladiators' shoulders. They have to play on this point for the overtime, but Shock give it up, and now the flip is back over. But as Kevster tried to make the most after the fight turned their way, he gets punished by Kilo. Rampage finally from Reiner takes care of the supports of the Shock. Now all damage from the Gladiators is permanent, and Kilo can do everything he wants, but the Gladiators still have more members, and it's up to the final fight of round 3 to decide our Busan winners.
As if I think at San Francisco Shock there, they were a little bit too happy to go for an early rampage when Gladiators still had all of their cooldowns to try and deal with it, like the Roar and the Speed Boost disengage as well. Now it's going to come down to one final fight. Yes, Lemon Violet almost has the Sound Barrier, but Skewed can answer this with the Rally, which has a lot more sustain for a tightly packed team fighting on an objective.
Oh, funny, Astro thought about the boop too. It's kind of dangerous to go off that coast side for Shock, and the barrier first from Violet against the Rally of Skewed. Gladiators have to play because its healing generates slowly, but Gladiator can benefit from it in time. They don't have healers and they barely have a tank left over. Prumper is doing work and he doesn't even need the blade, but he whips it out just to ego check the Gladiators because this is a San Francisco Shock map.
C9's in the chat from Kaluj and Violet. However, I think that in the end, it all comes down to the good peel we saw from Kaluj keeping Kilo alive and the peel that Kaluj has for these beat casts. Violet was in danger of not getting that beat cast off. Out comes the Shout. The additional health makes it a very safe ultimate. And because of that, Violet doesn't have to worry about healing straight over to the speed and rushing over the Gladiators. The target focus simply could not get through the over health. And of course, when you try and disengage, your formation starts to spread, and that mitigates the overall effectiveness of Skewed's Rally.
And every series that the Shock and Glads have played have gone to a minimum of 5 maps. Will it be the case still in this one? Qualification for Summer Showdown is on the line, and we'll see you after the break.
San Francisco Shock.
Just a depth of talent on their roster that can't be denied.
Some of the most hardcore carry performances that I've ever seen.
This is going to be a wild ride.
Somehow Violet's going to come to the rescue, get a double kill. Kalu says, how about that one, Chief? See you later.
Kilo, dude, his aim is so crispy.
Finn doesn't miss those. Holy cow.
Sam straights the backline, insta-killing. Oh, Mikey!
San Francisco, the greatest team in Overwatch.
I'm so excited for this series. This is the rematch of a lifetime. Last time these two teams met was at the mid-season Madness Grand Final, where Gladiators won 4-2. And Gladiators not getting the last laugh though, because they're 0-1 in the series and also 0-2 in the qualifiers in general. So Gladiators still have to do some climbing back.
Couple sullen faces and not many moving mouths on the LA Gladiators cameras at the moment, so I've got to assume that the coaches are in there trying to figure out where things are going wrong. And at the moment, if I had to identify 2 pain points, is that Kevster isn't getting as much value as Proper when it comes to either the Blades or the neutral play, and Funny Astro seems to be dialing a lot more than Violet, and that's meant that he's consistently behind on generation of the sound barriers, which is, it almost feels like it's a blaspheme to say. I think I'm in the multiverse of madness right now, where Violet, the flex from the legendaries in Yata, seems to be playing a better Lucio for this particular meta, for this particular playstyle than Funny Astro, where it feels like aggressive Lucios in this meta don't get rewarded for early aggression. It's about the mid-fight aggression, once you've made sure that your team haven't been early picked, where you can really start gaining some value from this hero.
And that's something that even the coaches are looking forward to. When I spoke to 9K from the Shock, he said Violet Proper versus Kevster and Funny Astro was gonna be the matchup to watch this series. And that's why I think Shock have such a large gap at the start of the control maps, was because they weren't afraid to invest the sound barrier from Violet just to have a better initiation of their fights. But that also gave Gladiators a chance to fight back with Kevster's Blades. So they're always within an inch of Shock. As we go to the new map with Gladiators attacking first, we'll see the Kevster Widow shot, but wondering if he's gonna still want the Sojourn or the Ashe after that. That's the question.
Sitting pretty on Paraizu. Welcome to the new map as of Beta 2. Just a body shot there onto Kalut, which is nice because look, the ult charge carries over as of this beta. And Kev's is going to be able to hold on to that. Oh, a second shot. That's interesting. We have Happy Gift for a second one as well. We've seen these kind of set plays before where they hope that San Francisco Shock, after that first grapple up, are going to sort of like become a little bit less disciplined. Like, ah, yes, the Widow has finished. We can go back into our peaking places. And then they take a head off afterwards.
Yeah, just Kevster just immediately to the bridge, while the rest of the Gladiators use that distraction for Kevster to go to the right staircase, and Proper's been found. Kevster gets the dash reset too. Shocker gonna take shelter on this right side. Violet could be a little bit late to that party. No, he does manage to escape. I don't know why he's popping his head back out. Glad's get an insane punish and never actually lose anyone throughout this fight, so that is big for Glads.
It could be that Proper just doesn't have the, like, 100% map awareness yet, because it is a new map and might have accidentally, dashed into that corner. But I'm willing to say that maybe Skewed got a good whip shot there that made sure Proper was not in the correct position to get the dash out that he wanted. Either way, the dash hits the wall. Proper no longer has a disengage, and that's punished very quickly by Gladiators, because this is a team that even if they are having some meta woes, they're not going to let you get away with mistakes like that for free. San Francisco Shock now getting aggressive. They want to take the fight as soon as possible.
I like the poke that's going into Kevster, so you're not letting him kind of go into these off-angle positions and looking for anything onto Finn or Violet. So Kevster returns to his team. Shout starts first from Glads, mirrored by Shock, and as the two collide, Reiner falls over, and without that front line, it's all up to the poke of Happy and the rest of the Gladiators at this point, and Kevster's made his way into the back line. So despite not having that tank around, Glad still managed to pull out a fight.
Yeah, sometimes Reiner dying doesn't matter. It's just about getting your team there. It's not inting, it's feeding with style, Lemon. And Reiner might be a little bit behind now on the generation of the Rampage, and that could have some long-term repercussions, but this has allowed for Kevster to be well ahead on the Blade from getting so much damage in that previous fight. If he uses it soon as well, he could even cut through Finn.
Oh, and there it is. There's a ton of ults. Rally v Rally, but only one blade standing out. Kevster, who's just using it to live and even just try to bulldoze Glads to a point B cap. I like kind of this gatekeeping from Kevster, not letting Kilo get this angle as big to deny that dynamite damage, and Kevster wins the one-on-one. Will get packed by Skewed, and the fight continues in favor of the Gladiators, who get the point B cap without really sacrificing anyone, which means they could even momentum push here and see what else they can get.
A 5-minute time back now. This is horrendously large for the LA Gladiators. Still, San Francisco Shock are trying to build up towards an ultimate they can use. Finn had to reactively use the rally in that previous fight when Kevster brought out the blade. But Kevster simply wanted to elicit that reaction so Skewed could get the better rally afterwards and then disengage to further afield targets like Kilo and isolated a 1v1. Now San Francisco, yes, they can control the high ground, but what can they do with it when Kevster continually harries their backline?
I think Shock are okay with just generating ults. They're very close to it. Dynamite away from a Bob. Proper has the blade, but it's Gladiators that initiate first with the Sound Bear. Violet doing it second. Overclock from Happy. He has the space to work, and Violet wanted to harass him, but he gets executed instead. Now all of the Shock have to reset quickly so that they can buy themselves another fight at the end of C. Now Gladiators moving on. 4 minutes left. Rampage at the ready. We'll see how this will go. Shock.
Ryan's got the Rampage.
Oh yeah, there is Bob ready for Kilo. Okay, looks like Legda's back. I was getting a little concerned.
Yeah, it might be.
Reiner has a Rampage, and as soon as you can just take up a kind of take this fight as late as you can to push Shock against the wall with the Rampage, but Shock are vying for high ground.
Yeah, Violet doesn't have anything to answer this Rampage either, so this is far more dangerous for the San Francisco Shock, who don't have a fight to give. Los Angeles Gladiators, they are going to strike first. Reiner into the back.
Two-man Rampage and the swing to end it all. Collusion's down, no Rampage, and the proper blade goes down immediately, but Kilo's Bob on the high ground while Glads were engaging in there. Got Shock probably the amount of kills they needed just to stabilize enough with the 3 members they have left.
I really like the Bob as a counter to the Rampage here, because the Rampage inherently demands Los Angeles Gladiators go deep after Reiner so that he doesn't get isolated and so that they can try and follow up after those antis. But Bob does best when you can't disengage from him, and that's exactly what the Rampage forces. So huge brain power there from Kilo, and now Happy's going to mirror.
Rampage 4 hit by the Glads. They're barely living through this rally of Skewed, and the Kevster blade, I think, shifts all of the Shock's attention to him. He converts 2 kills. Not before Proper gets the same 2-kill trade. Kevster gets the last laugh. We look back on the card, and there's only like 1 or 2 members of the Shock remaining. These fights have really come down to the wire.
Yeah, they do come down to the wire, Lemon, but San Francisco Shock, they have their advantage when it comes to the spawns, so as long as they are the last team standing, Los Angeles Gladiators, their progress gets stalled. Their once hearty 5-minute time bank has been cut in half to only 2.5, and also those resources are missing. Finn can very much tempo control this next fight with an early rally, but of course doesn't want to use that before Los Angeles Gladiators are committed to this fight.
Just about punishing mistakes here. That is a big dynamite. Happy's just 1 or 2 away from a Bob, and Shock know that Glads don't have any ults, so they surge forward off of the rally as soon as they earn it. They get the kill on the Happy. They return to the car to make sure Shock aren't getting any, or Glads aren't getting any free push. And Gladiators are now just trying to hide and find any shelter they can, and every stagger here matters, but Glads did enough work to get themselves a huge time bank for C, so they can keep trying.
Well, that was far from a coherent team fight from the Gladiators. They did manage to get a little bit of a cheeky push on the cart, which might come to be quite important if they don't actually get the full cap here on Beizu C. Violet with the sound barrier, but what is the stimulus that he wants to answer? Ideally the blade or Reiner's Rampage, but neither of them are up yet. So Funny Astro could try and force this out of Violet early by using his own beat, but it's likely going to be in response to Proper's blade.
So Glads immediately drop from the high ground, and now they get run over by the Kilo Bob. Glads took shelter in this room to try to avoid the damage, but now they're trapped. The barrier from Funny Astro just didn't help, and Proper waits for the perfect moment to use the blade. Glads are still getting some push out of this, so although there's only a minute left, they only have a few more meters to go, but somehow Glads are getting random kills. It's only Reiner and Funny Astro left versus the 3 of the Shock, and the defense have respawn advantage, so it just gets so close every time, but Glads can't finish off the fights.
San Francisco Shock there. They did a really good job of shepherding Gladiators into this central underground area because Kilo's bomb actually had very limited sightlines. It was stuck in the underground with them, and so they had to make sure that Los Angeles Gladiators were continuously in engagement range of that bomb. Violet still has this sound barrier, which is going to be a major advantage. That's a lot more burst survivability than Skewed can provide with the rally, where he can so easily be focused down because it doesn't give armor anymore. It only gives over health. It's going to be a fight on the cart here, Lemon.
And Glads just went underground, or I guess through the room, to have less poke into them as they went to the cart. They used the rally to get the extra over health. Now Kevster with the shout can use the blade and see what he can do with the resources he has. The barrier from Violet and the Kaluge Rampage was enough to weaken the Glads, but not kill them yet, as Happy at 1 HP is still getting kills, and Kevster's getting resets into the back line. Finn is no longer alive and not even there to touch Proper either, and Glads will finish in overtime.
A critical misread from Kaluge. A 0-person Rampage heads up the stairs, but nobody's home from the Los Angeles Gladiators. All avoid the Purple Wrath because they are Purple Wrath itself, and there it is, Kaluge in the chat. Beefed. I have to agree, bud. The 0-man Rampage is not ideal for one of the most powerful ultimates in the game. However, San Francisco Shock, they can be proud of their third-point defense. They whittled a gargantuan 5-minute time bank down to overtime.
Yeah, and both of our stars are shining bright when it comes to Kevster and Proper, but Kevster's 23-3. He's only died 3 times. So you really know when this guy goes in, he's measured, he's calculated, and he only goes in with the resources that he needs. So just either the rally or the shout, and Gladiators are so good at supporting Kevster when he dives in because he just almost always converts. It did take 5 minutes for Gladiators to get this done, and I think, you know, there was some rotations where Gladiators are all over the place trying to run away from the shock. It really does get super chaotic, but Kevster is diffing when it comes to both damage and final blows when it comes to Proper.
Yeah, Kevster's certainly recaptured his magic from Busan, where it definitely felt like Proper was far more in control, even though it was such a close map. Now we'll have to see if Los Angeles Gladiators have any ideas as to the defense here. It seems like this is a map where either you get hard held on first point, or it's going to be all about C. We don't see as many holds on B for this particular map unless it's right at the end. For now, though, San Francisco Shock playing a little bit slower, maybe looking for a big dynamite from Kilo that Proper can follow up on.
Yeah, no dynamite yet, but the shout first from Shock. They make it through under the bridge as Kilo, as he was trying to travel to help be with the team. Glads collapse on him and him only. Usually if you're kind of the hit scan, especially the Ashe, you're so vulnerable. You don't have as much kind of escapability as a Sojourn has. So Kilo has to be very sure that when he crosses, the Genji is not in sight.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Lemon. Kilo playing that off angle there is so dangerous, and not just because of a lack of escapability, but also that Los Angeles Gladiators, they technically control the high ground right above Kilo. So they don't have to invest any movement cooldowns to actually get on top of him and can follow up after Kilo uses that coach gun to blast away from any assailants. Look at Kevster's ult generation. He's 72%. He's owning.
Yeah, for now, that's what kind of the defense having free poke gets you, but Shock trying to get back control of the high ground. I love that boot from Violet. You just always want to dislodge Gladiators from where they're comfortable, but Happy gets the range shot onto Kilo, and as soon as that happens, Shock are left with half as much damage. It's up to Proper to just see if he could get any of the trades without Finn. This is just Shock having to play from behind. Now scrapping their way through. It was a 2-on-3.
Oh, what?
Violet, what are you cooking there, bud? I don't know about that one.
Oh,
he knows. He knows.
Yep. That. Well, let's move on and strike that from the annals of history. Admittedly, San Francisco Shock just got a lot done in a 2 versus 4. Collusion Violet actually taxed Gladiators considerably, and that means that Gladiators have to actually make a little bit of an effort now to recapture the high ground. All 5 get on there, and so we're back to business as usual, and there's nothing to answer Kevster's blade now.
Yeah, the Kevster Blade, he has maybe wanting to be at full health, especially with how clumped Shock are playing, but Finn is just so close to rally, and Kilo needs finds it, but as soon as Finn has the rally, he pops it. Do Gladiators even want to still invest the blade? It's the dash, but Finn is in sights, and he's trying to dodge the whip shot. Goes after Finn at the end when he's out of cooldowns, and without those supports, Shock are toast. They're looking pretty toast this map too, with only a minute and a half left to get the point.
And admittedly, Los Angeles Gladiators are doing a really good job here of generating crossfires. We saw that Kevster actually tried to harass San Francisco Shock onto a point where Happy was able to sit behind them with a fully charged rail, and now there's going to be so many of those available because of the overclock. So essentially, San Francisco Shock now, their fate lies in the hands of Proper and Kaluge, the two most important ultimates, the Dragon Blade and the Rampage. Proper needs to go first, force out the sound barrier from Funny Astro, and force Gladiators to fight on the point so Kaluge afterwards can get a big Rampage on a ground-born defensive team.
Sound barrier from Funny Astro. Gladiators working with a big advantage on top of just always first blooding Kilo, who just can't seem to be in safe range from Kevster. So how are the Shock gonna play this advantage, or just play at all when Kilo's always down? He's close to Bob, but maybe he has to swap to Sojourn just to have better escapability, or maybe Shock have to play more with Kilo to protect him, but this is just rough to see from the Shock.
Gladiators knew exactly what the plan was, so they just beat into the San Francisco Shock and try and out-tempo them. Now there's nothing to answer Proper, but the raw mechanics of the Los Angeles Gladiators. Two-time champions, surely an unprotected blade can be shut down as Proper sets up for the fight.
Ooh, he gets hit, yeah, Proper's hit by the anti from Reiner's Rampage, but Kaluz does the same thing. Happy, Kevster, skewed, Funny Astro hit, they take
No point.
shelter, and Shock are just left with not being able to get a single tick on the new map, so Gladiators will tie it 1-1. I was not expecting this at all.
So no blade. Proper goes so deep. The Rampage is solid. Los Angeles Gladiators decide, you know what, I'm just going to make it so that whatever Proper does, he is having a bad time. Ryan almost goes for a solo Rampage on him, but it's so smart, because Proper doesn't want to use the blade when he's taking that ticking bleed damage, when he can't get healed, when he feels like it's going to be an int to use the blade, and that means that unfortunately he's saving it for Overwatch 3.
I mean, Shock are onto something, or somebody mentioned in match chat that Shock lose when they play Ashe. And I mean, Shock's only map losses were the first two against the Justice, where Kilo was on Ashe. So we'll see if maybe Sojourn will be the key to success for the Shock. But for now, Gladiators tie it 1-1, and we'll see you after the break for map 3. What a series we have so far. It's 1-1. Glads with a massive comeback on this last map with the full hold and quite a major gap in stats when it comes to Kevster versus Proper.
Yeah, Kevster's been doing really well on Peizu, and I think a large part of it has been stats generated on the defense, Lemon. In particular, we saw that Kilo continually got killed by Kevster, and that does so much for the Genji, because the Ash's primary duty is to continually land either the head or the body shots from the ADS on the Genji, and essentially keep him hiding, asking for those armor packs from the Brigitte to keep him topped up, and that really minimizes the Genji downtime. But because they could continually just drop on Kilo as the Los Angeles Gladiators and kill him instantly, Kevster could spend so much time just tearing through the remainder of San Francisco Shock and playing more like a frontline combatant.
And I noted that Kevster had those 3 deaths in the first round when they were attacking. So I guess Kevster just never died on that defense because all he had to do was wait for Kilo to be even slightly near the bridge and only commit to him, as you said. And I think Shock are kind of now realizing that Ash, just choosing Ash, nothing against Kilo, but it's just been a liability. And Kilo did just look that much better on Sojourn when it came to Busan, but maybe just leaning too much into the Bob generation with Glads being clumped up on the defense and hoping that the Dynamite was going to help Proper a bit more. But without Kilo there, then Proper is left with trying to stop Kevster from fragging everyone else, or Proper having to do the same thing against Skewed. But you kind of saw that Funny Asher and Skewed also had very low deaths.
Yeah. However, when it comes to the Kilo hit scan choices that we were discussing, Lemon, on one map and one map only, you do get the option of the Widowmaker, and that's Junkertown. We've previously seen Kilo go up against Eggsy from the Florida Mayhem on this map, and that was quite close. I believe it was a 4-3 to the San Francisco Shock last week in their 3-0 victory over the Florida Mayhem. And Happy is going to roll out here on the Ashe themselves. And the Ashe, she seems a lot more popular on these escort maps. They're generally longer, so the long-range immediate damage that you can generate from the Ashe ADSing is very important. While Ashe is a little bit less overtly deadly than the Sojourn at range, because you can't get the one-shot rails, she does have a lot more DPS uptime, because it's very difficult for the Sojourn to build up the rails at long range because of a bloom on her primary fire.
Happy definitely just showing that he's on Ashe, just going so close to the spawn room doors. But with this composition, playing this close to the spawn is going to guarantee you multiple fights for A. And even if you lose and you get crushed, because the advantage is for the offense, you can go to their spawn room doors at any time. Glads want to take time off this time bank. So Shock, kind of realizing the split push from the defense, could choose to rush into any grouping of the Glads and have a big advantage. So Reiner is now just anchoring the cart, has used Shao because he got to half health, will go over to the Mega Pack side, but Kevster's been isolated, but he never dies. He manages to get into pack range of Skewed. Funny Astro is getting shot, and Kilo is back on his tried and true Sojourn, and even though it's a 2-for-1 trade, just having any picks at all into the Glads will relieve that pressure from the spawn.
I think that one of the things that people who religiously watch this meta will realize about was a very sheepish and almost cowardly spawn camp from the Los Angeles Gladiators. They weren't committed to holding the spawn. There was a very early disengagement from Reiner after catching a couple of shurikens from Proper, and that gives so much space for Kilo to operate freely and build up those rails to find these killing blows onto people like Funny Astro and eventually Reiner as well. Los Angeles Gladiators, if they're going to spawn camp in the future, they have to commit to it rather than do a halfway house.
Oh, this is such an open area. Gladiators just use the shout to get a position on the right side. Shock shouts second and just rush into them. And Gladiators immediately lose Happy because he was too close, and Reiner because of resources. So Shock might lose Finn here. Not a big deal because this is a point A cap for the Shock.
That came down to Finn hitting a really good whip shot as well onto Reiner as he was trying to engage. That meant that Reiner had to try and play catch-up by using the speed boost from the shout to actually engage into the shock. And like you said, Kaluj gets second shout, and that really just does decide the fight because they're running into you with more HP. And when you are a bunch of squishy heroes who are a lot more hardy, things become a lot easier. Look at the pace again from Violet when it comes to generating these sound barriers, outpacing Funny Astro by 30%, and Finn can open this up as well with a tempo rally, even if Skewed can answer.
Yeah, interesting that Shocker just deciding to play the low ground here. Violet did some scouting, knows Gladiators on the high ground. Reiner drops, uses the shout. Violet responds with the sound barrier. So a Shock have a momentary advantage, and they're chasing after Kevster, who's just dashing back to safety. He thought he had the execution on the Violet. Now Kevster's in a hairy situation, and Glads are just falling like flies, trying to support him, including Skewed and Funny Astro, who were just the first to die. So Shock really bunkered down and focused down well.
Happy needs to use Bob and then just swap. That's simply it. Los Angeles Gladiators, they aren't comfortable enough playing slowly, or they are being overwhelmed by the San Francisco Shock and need to return to a fast playstyle that they had on Parizu. And Los Angeles Gladiators, ideally, are going to use the Bob mid-fight here after San Francisco Shock have committed with something like a Blade, and then Happy can swap.
Okay, the rally first from Shock. They know this fight is coming up. The Bob from Happy goes way too far. That won't have an effect, but maybe this Blade from Proper will. He's got the rally and the shout and the resource he needs, but he needs to climb up to Happy, which has got a sound barrier. And with those resources, Kevster dives in the back with the Blade. We're left with a 3-on-4. Favoring the Gladiators, and the defensive respawns are closer, so Shock are losing grip on this fight.
Okay, now Gladiators at least will be able to get a little bit more value out of Happy on the Ashe, because Happy's going to have a slightly extended poke phase as Gladiators move on in, and that was an expensive fight for San Francisco Shock as well. I think they overlayered too much into this fight that Funny Astro could counter with that sound barrier. Now playing from a neutral position, Los Angeles Gladiators, providing that Reiner doesn't use his shout too early, should be well suited to engage into a San Francisco Shock who still have to commute to the car.
I respect the ego from Skew to just want to duel Proper. Just denying that window is denying Proper the access to the Gladiators backline. So Gladiators on the high ground, though. They notice Proper, who dashes back away. The shout's been used from the Shock, and Reiner's waiting for the Shock to come out in the open to use this Rampage, but Reiner's coming to them. He gets Finn so low, and he's focused on taking care of that main healer for the Shock. But as long as you gatekeep Shock, you're fine. But Shock are able to leave this tiny room thanks to the sound barrier of Violet. The Rampage of Reiner to deny any healing after that, and Shock fall like dominoes as Gladiators get another hold.
Reiner's rally there not only denied healing, but it was also a perfect counter Rampage as well to the dive that San Francisco Shock thought that they could execute upon Reiner. He went under 200 HP, and San Francisco Shock decided if we shout and go on top of Reiner right now, we can overwhelm him, kill him. But the healing from the wound, that drain that the Junker Queen gets from all of her wounds, gave Reiner so much healing. 100 per target hit, so Reiner was so well sustained, and it meant that Skew could actually spread out the resource a little more as well. Reiner should get an early carnage here, which is really going to attack San Francisco Shock.
Shock are hiding, coming out in the open now. Gladiators maybe choosing this moment to fight. Finn has started the rally. The Happy Bob is in Narnia yet again. Finn has been isolated. Kevster identifies that, but Shock managed to get him back into safety. But now their Finn is so low along with Violet, and Happy gets to farm them with that dynamite that got them low enough. So Kevster went in and thought he could just Blade, but he's at 99%. And now there's a 3-man sound barrier for Funny Astro because it's 3-on-3, I believe. So the Shock are left without any heals. That was a big barrier advantage that the Glads worked with. But Proper is trying to finish off all these kills with the dash resets. He's so close to Funny Astro. He dashes past. Kevster will look to him in this Blade. Violet's at the top, and Shock just pushed the card into point B.
That was a mad, messy fight. And with Funny Astro trying to use that clutch barrier there as well, it meant that now Proper has an unanswerable Dragon Blade ready to go. Funny Astro didn't actually go for the Mega Health Pack in that Junker room, anticipating that's where Proper was going to be pre-aiming his shurikens and thinking, I can't take a shuriken, I just have to try and dodge for now. I have to wait for my Brigitte to return and get the repair pack from them instead of playing for the Mega. But that means Proper gets to steal that with a dash later on and avoid Kevster's Blade on the way.
Oh, this could be a massive Rampage. It's the Proper Blade first, though, and there's such good disengage from Glads that this Proper Blade was more of a zoning one, but it still buys Shock a halfway point to point C. Now you have the overclock from Kilo. Now that there is such space between the two teams, he's on the high ground, but he's got full sights on the Gladiators who rotate to Mega to try and get away from Kilo at this point. And Shock are just converting on kills, and Glads might not even have a hold unless someone comes out to touch. Funny Astro will be on the job, and Skewed is out too. And if with, yep, there is no touch at all. So Shock get a 1-minute time bank.
Unbelievable boot there from Finn. Still the C9 is called from from Violet. Yeah, just a little bit of banter. Do a little bit of trolling in the lobby. Finn's whip shots, by the way, in this series have been a marked step up from the first week. Finn has been hitting these not only in terms of accuracy, but at critical moments. That not only stopped the contest there from Funny Astro, but earlier on the defense of Gladiators, I pointed out how Reiner had to use a early shout because Finn got a good whip shot midway through his engage and stopped Reiner from getting any value from his initial walking forward. And Finn's timing and choice of when to use these whip shots, I think, has been very much a mitigating factor for a lot of Gladiators engages.
Yeah, these have been some just good boops onto Kevster in general. Still, a 1-minute finish for Shock is pretty impressive. I mean, finishing this map in general is so difficult, and they made point C look so easy. I think Glad's wanting to recontest the end of point B meant that they just had no chance to hold the point C choke, which would have helped. But Proper, I think, has been stepping up and just kind of gatekeeping Kevster a lot. And I think once that Kevster's out of the picture, it's easier for Proper to go after Happy after that.
Interesting stat here. Happy has twice as much damage as Kilo at the moment. About 3.8 on Kilo's side to 7.9 for Happy. But this is actually translated into the ultimate generation for Finn and Violet being much faster on average than it is for Skewed and Funny Astro. Both Finn and Violet are taking under 2 minutes to build up their ultimates, whereas Skewed and Funny Astro, they're taking 2 minutes 16, 2 minutes 40 each, and it means that San Francisco Shock are consistently getting these earlier support ultimates to dictate where fights happen and under what conditions.
And where the fight is happening is important right here and right now. Shock not wanting the spawn camp, so they're limiting this to be a one fight for point A, but with this much cover for Shock, this is better for not only Kilo, who's going to be out of Kevster's range, but just in general. So Shock are going for the better fight instead of the two weaker fights, but maybe more time bank drain, but it all depends on how successful Shock are in these fights as Gladiators prepare their approach. It's the first shout from Reiner as Shock just keep distancing themselves away. They're keeping Kilo as safe as possible and making sure that if Kevster approaches, Shock are ready to react.
Remember the Gladiators, when they are fighting on this cart as well, they have essentially an extra aura healer to keep them topped up, which can be important in these matchups. It means that you can get more out of your speed.
There's just such a dance between the Glads and the Shock, using the shouts to rotate around each other until Finn was left without a shield bash to get back to his team. And Glad's punished out immediately. And as soon as your Brigitte falls, you're just going to get out-brawled. So Glads get point A pretty easily.
Good early target focus. Getting rid of Finn, trying to out-rotate that Brigitte, making sure that not only does it mean you're getting less aura healing, but it also really hobbles the enemy Genji, because he can no longer go far afield looking for an off angle, because the way that Genjis can be sustained through that is through the repair packs that Brigitte sends out at good range, which obviously aren't going to be missing. And that means that Proper has to play a lot tighter in and can be subject to a lot more random splash damage and poke from the Gladiators. Now Shock, once again, controlling the high ground. I believe the off angle is going to be coming from Kilo this time.
Yeah, it sounds like Shock are already kind of adjusting the way they play the game, just being a lot more wary of Kilo and almost just reacting to Gladiators instead of initiating on their own. I mean, they're on the defense after all, but Glads, how are they going to gap close this? They also have access to the top left window where Kevster was and sees that, well, Proper's on the other side. He doesn't want to mess with him. Kevster wants to access Finn like he usually does. Gladiators are free to rotate to this top right. They'll be really close to Shock, as Shock are just trying to figure out where they are. As Glads go underground, they fake them out. They get to more shelter at the end of the point. As Happy ends the shot on the Violet, you deny the sound barrier that they could have had. Now Glads are free to have those resources and use ult if they think it's necessary. But Astro drops it, but he's unable to save Skewed before he got way too close to the sun. I think it's still a wonderful fight from Glads despite all of that, and they should be capping B.
Now once more, the payload entering third point. We are going to see a 5-minute time bank for the Los Angeles Gladiators. San Francisco Shock, yes, they completed, but it's only with a minute to go. However, on Paraiso, it was all about the San Francisco Shock third point defense. Funny Astro, what's he doing there? What is he cooking? Probably pulled in by a knife, I want to say.
Most likely. And this is now where Shock can take a lot of time away. This is something that Glads wish they could have done, is hold this point C choke. And Shock can kind of wait for these doors to close before really wanting to engage. As Gladiators do not want to have their backs against the wall. They try to creep up to the right side. Shock want to cut off those rotations. Kaluj has a big rampage available, and he goes for it and hits 3, including the Gladiator support to rally behind Skewed, and they try to back away, but Proper's too quick with the blade, and Glads have 2 cut down already. It's not unwinnable for them yet. They got to pick on the Kilo. It's an all-out brawl, and it all depends on those cooldowns, where at the end of the day, Shock stood tall.
Yeah, Shock did stand tall, but they also invested all 3 of their, like, over fight-winning ultimates. Now they've got the overclock, which can be of hit or miss value, quite literally, and the rally, which isn't as good at keeping the Brigitte sustained as previously. Kevster's got the blade good to go.
Yeah, Blade is good to go for Kevster, and how good is it? He already takes care of Kilo, and Kaluj is next on the hit list, and this is really all said and done. Kevster tried to dash through to get the safety, but Glads will now get out of this point C choke with barely some people alive, but still, 3.5 minutes, there's a chance, a small chance they can get a better time bank.
I mean, that choke is so powerful. We actually saw the Los Angeles Gladiators themselves held for about 4.5 minutes by Dallas Fuel on that particular choke, and then a heartbreaking C9 afterwards. But San Francisco Shock still have the overclock from Kilo. Didn't feel he had the space to use it in the previous fight, but now knows that it can't really be answered overtly from Los Angeles Gladiators, so will need to be answered rotationally, which means that Kaluj will be able to get a second shout most likely.
Oh, this is the big overclock. I like that reposition from Kilo when he thought Glads was getting close and has forced Glads into this tiny room where the rest of the brawl will take place. But Shock are so unhealthy right now, but they're getting out just barely. Kevster's gonna start getting dash resets pretty soon, and Glads can conserve their ultimates. Shock gotta hope they got a touch soon, but I think it's just too little and too late, and Glads needed to win this fight, and respawns are too far away from Shock, so that's 1.5 minutes extra that the Glads have.
A big fight in a small room is heaven for Skewed and Funny Astro. You can get so much mace cleave through everybody. Inspire for days. The repair packs are flying. And Los Angeles Gladiators, they managed to take cover very early with Reiner using a shout, which is why Reiner died, because he had to use the shout to give everyone the speed boost to go over and get into cover away from Kilo's overclock. But I think that San Francisco Shock, they became a little bit too eager to move into Los Angeles Gladiators territory that they kind of bunkered down in to survive the storm of Kilo, and that led to too much damage being taken while it was Kilo who was getting so many of the resources just to try and survive all of this. And then, of course, we saw Kilo get challenged by Kevster afterwards, and the shout had already been used by Kaluj, so the ability to keep Kilo alive in the aftermath of that fight may well have been an ill omen for San Francisco Shock.
Yeah, for now, Glads going back to their spawn room hold. At least we're going into the second round of attacks, so Shock should know that this is coming. But I think Gladiators are a bit different here.
Camp.
Yeah, I hope it actually works this time, but Happy's also playing closer to the team because Happy last time was on an off angle, and that's kind of how things fell apart for the Glads, was that they were trying to take too much space.
Yeah, this time Happy's not playing on the Ash Lemon, instead on the Sojourn, so a lot easier to play faster for the Los Angeles Gladiators. Hopefully won't be caught in a disengage this time and can work a little bit more effectively with the actual plan itself, as Kevster is going to be the one playing the off angle this time.
Oh, that's a good knife pull, at least just the bleeding. You got Finn low enough that Kevster just needs to focus and execute, but Shock have been able to heal back up, and they have access to the spawn room doors at any time. Shock can just leave this fight, but they don't need to. They've killed Skewed, and now it's farming time for the Shock boys as they take care of Kevster, and now are dashing after the rest. So, with the 1 minute that Shock have, they really need to maximize this as much as possible, especially with the extra 1.5 minutes that Glads have. They'll have another fight that the Shock don't, so getting close to point A is kind of the goal here for Shock.
Yeah, and with 19 seconds on the card, it should not be too difficult. Los Angeles Gladiators, I imagine, will just be trying to take the most geographically advantageous fight they can, with Happy up on the highest of grounds, which means Proper would have to take a significant diversion to get up here. Reiner already good to path, but remember, this is going to be all about when the shouts happen. Is Reiner going to expend one early here to touch a car?
This is final fight for the Shock. Just getting as much push as possible. It's Gladiators that might have a bit more pressure on their shoulders to engage. Proper was on the left and keeping Kepster in check. Proper dashes towards the back line, and Gladiators take care of him, at least as much as they can, as Shock still were able to run over the Gladiators and immediately killed Skewed. So that is great backline access from the Shock, and it's fine that you don't have Proper because you've got the point A cap, and that is the goal. Mission complete.
Oh, the Gladiators' plan there was actually quite smart. They had Happy use the Disruptor Shot behind the cart to do a huge amount of damage to Kaluj and whip shot Kaluj back into it via Skewed. But this meant that Skewed, after Kaluj used his shout to escape the Disruptor Shot, did not have a whip shot to keep Kaluj at bay and could easily be overwhelmed by the speed-boosted San Francisco Shock. Now with a first point cap, San Francisco, I think that they've outpaced how much they should have done with a minute. All of this is gravy now.
Let's see how far this gravy train really goes, though. But we got double support ultimates from Shock. Glad's not having a rally could make a big difference in this fight. Shock could even go as far as capping point A. Rally first from Finn. Proper could unleash the blade at any time, but the shout is used from Glads. Maybe Proper wants to wait for that to be over. As Gladiators go to the left room, Kester's a little bit far from the flock, but Skewed is there to give him packs just in case. Proper, now Glads are baited out, he goes for the blade, but the barrier from Funny Astro is well timed. It keeps the Gladiators kicking, and kicking they shall, as Shock are down 3, and this is not salvageable, so Shock's fight will end here, almost at the end of B.
Oh, Lemon. Right now, Happy is doing so much damage. 14.6k thus far on Junkertown compared to almost 9k for Kilo. It is a huge differential in the amount of damage, but the thing is, Happy isn't getting a huge amount more killing blows. It's 10 killing blows to 9, and that means that things aren't being finished as quickly for the LA Gladiators. There's a lot more trash damage being sent out. It's allowing Finn and Violet to do a huge amount of healing and get these support ultimates. Alas, it feels like Gladiators, they do sometimes just like see the eye of the Kaiser, and they recognize when to take these fights and where. And while their first gambit on A didn't work with trying to force Kaluj to use a preemptive shout using the Disruptor Shot, was eventually punished. When it comes to their ult fights, they are very well regimented.
Oh, the quick turn as soon as you saw Kilo use the shift jump. This is just the experience and just, I mean, the skill that Kepster and Proper have. There's no getting away with anything with these two playing. They're just gonna so quickly dash, and that's the kind of mobility and why Genji is meta right now, is you need something to quickly follow up, and Proper and Kepster are always on that tail. So Shock going for a spawn room hold, different than their last defense where they opted for kind of that T corner at the end of A. But now Kepster's on the Hanzo just to get that Sonic out to see if maybe Shock were playing close, and he's back on the Genji.
All right, cart does begin moving. For now, San Francisco Shock looks to try and play the gap between the sheds. Oh, Kilo's been identified on an off angle. Now a 4 versus 5 can be manufactured.
Oh, Kepster is already harassing Finn. There's Boops on the edge, but no one has fallen yet. Kepster takes way too much pressure and is unable to clean off on Finn. So Gladiators are down 1 or 2 now, and this is just not going to be a hold that can continue. But Shock are just letting this happen, so it's just about the fight breaking down in the Shock's way, as Gladiators only have 2 minutes left.
Losing Violet is dangerous, but admittedly with Funny Astro down, this should be fine for San Francisco Shock. They aren't going to be outpaced too fast on their disengagement here, and that's going to allow multiple members of San Francisco Shock to get away. Look at Proper's ult charge. What a beast! He's 80% Lemon, and no one from Los Angeles Gladiators is even close to being able to try and contest this, whether it be by support ultimate or by another means. But Proper was actually effectively countered last time, so he's got to be careful with where he ends up. Can't afford to catch a Carnage from Reiner.
Yeah, that big difference was just Kepster is taking a lot more focus fire because he's so committed on Finn, and Shock, like I've already said on just the last rounds of Junkertown, are playing almost a more reactive style against the Gladiators, hoping to punish Kepster on the approach as Proper jumps to the sun, goes immediately after Happy. Couldn't get the dash reset because of a well-timed shout from Ryder, but he's still doing just fine, even at the 9 HP that he was. The 2 kills is all the Shock need to send Gladiators packing.
Critical difference there. Skewed missed the whip shot. Proper had nothing to stop him from going exactly where he wanted to with that blade. However, this is what the larger time bank rewards you with, Lemon. You can have that wiped fight you can take both your support ultimates into the next one, knowing that you can try and force out the rally with your own, and that you are going to have a blade before Proper regenerates his, and you'll be going, oh, no way.
That is a good headshot, so the Shock are going to unleash and see if they can get the trade while they're close. The rally from Finn takes a body shot from Happy. The rally's matched by Skewed. Happy just still trying to do work, but the Sound Bearer might be what defines it. Gladiators using just a little bit later is giving them an advantage as Skewed is chasing after Violet as Proper peels for him. Reiner is there to try and finish up on the kills on the Shock supports, but they're somehow getting away, and left alone is Kilo, who's picking off the birds from the sky like Duck Hunt, and Shock might have just done it. In overtime, they will end it, this in their favor, and Shock go to series point.
In that final fight, Kilo being able to return in time and then play Overwatch from the high ground. And of course, San Francisco Shock surviving so long there as well. In Sound Barrier versus Sound Barrier, it should have been Funny Astros to win by popping that second one. They had the advantage when it came to the Blades because Proper used his early to win a previous fight. However, when it came down to it for San Francisco Shock, they just played the macro game a little bit better, Lemon.
I'm the player of the game from Skew, kind of the micro too, not gonna lie, but that really came down to the second round of attacks and only a minute and a half difference, and Shock still came out ahead, even with the smaller time bank. Congratulations to them on map 3, but we're gonna throw it to a break and we'll see you all for map 4.
new hero stepping into the fold, a few new maps too.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting.
Kevster keeps Pelican in check and makes sure that he doesn't get close to Ons, which is really good awareness from the Gladiators, who force Pelican back, and now Houston's backs are against the wall, but Gladiators are not healthy, and they're locked into a fight that they can't escape in. Pelican finally closes the gap between himself and Ons, and Merritt kills 3. He is having an incredible series. Usually want to save that sound barrier to counter the opposing Dragon Blade, but it wouldn't hurt to have that extra sustain. About when does Yaki want to find an opportunity, especially after the shout, but the shout's been used by Doge. Here's the rally from Lastro. Houston push into New York, but it's the sound bear at the last second from Ansu J that gives New York a breath of fresh air as Yaki's blade is finally slicing through all the extra health, and New York come out ahead once all the resources of the Houston Outlaws have been expended.
They have the Rampage. Feels like they're just trying to bait the Shock into them so they can use a Rampage and get it onto the backline. That gets pulled in with that knife. There's the Rampage, comes out, hits 4. That's good. Target priority right now is Kilo and Proper. They take him down with ease. A perfectly timed Rampage from Mag. Maybe that's what they were doing. Maybe I called it correctly there. Just baiting the San Francisco Shock down to low ground to set up for that Rampage. And look at this forward push. I mean, yeah, there's no hope for you, unfortunately, Proper and Kilo. Straight back to the spawn, would you?
We go to the cart, and it's 5-on-4 for the Gladiators. This could be winnable for Houston to 3-0, one of the best teams in the league, and it's starting to fall their way. Glads are down 2, no Rider, no Skewed, but you have Kevster, and you have a dream to keep this alive. The DPS do it all, and it's just on. Who cancels the bomb? Gladiators are still alive.
Aspire used that overclock super early. A beat from the Titans, in fact. They just want to go ham. They're going to go in, touch the spawn maybe. Master gets the better of Dredro and the little Lucio 1v1, and Aspire cleans 2. The Vancouver Titans. They're looking, they're hunting, the payload moving, a couple of meters to go, and this will just be it. Dredro used the beat at the last moment, and the Vancouver Titans have done it. They found their first win in over a year. They are now 1-13. August 14th was the day many were counting down to, and the Vancouver Titans can let out a sigh of relief. I mean, look, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a legacy, but maybe the Titans have started one right here today.
We just wanted to give a big shout out to all our artists out there that have been supporting our amazing teams, and you can have the spotlight on you, fellow artists. Overwatchleague.com/art gallery. You can submit all of your art for a chance to be featured on broadcast.
Yeah, we've been seeing some amazing things in the community and in the lobby too, Lemon. That Junkertown was so hotly contested between San Francisco Shock and LA Gladiators, and now Shock are one map away from equaling the mythical map win streak of the Vancouver Titans, which was done in 2019 by another roster chock full of rookies fresh off of dominance from Korean contenders, just like San Francisco Shock are now.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to qualifiers, Shock always go undefeated, but tournament play, when the stakes are high, Gladiators are the better team, which is just so funny to see from both these teams. But speaking of having to compete at Toronto in the Summer Showdown, let's go to our next map, New Queen Street, our push map, to see, will we actually not get a 5-map set for the first time between Shock and Glads? I don't know.
And once again, all eyes should be trained on Happy and Kilo to see what the dynamic between these hit scans will be. I think that both of our teams have actually looked better on the Sojourn, although Gladiators, they aren't the fastest team. It feels like having Happy on the Sojourn kind of forces them to be fast and follow up upon any mistakes that they see. So I like having Happy being able to force that by saying, I've put down a disruptor field, we are going now. On the other side, San Francisco Shock, Kilo going to be mirroring that. And I think that the Sojourn, when it comes to push, is a very good option because push is such a fast-moving game mode around a mobile objective that it serves you well to have that slide and, of course, to be able to control the space with the disruptor field. Question is, for Los Angeles Gladiators, will they be able to keep Funny Astro alive?
I mean, that's $1 million question right there. And yeah, I just don't think you have time to just sit and poke with an Ashe. It's just there's always fighting. It is called a push game type after all. There's always pushing. But speaking of which, both teams trying to battle for control for this main hockey statue. It's kind of this natural high ground around the bot, and you kind of saw Proper just hanging around the ledge, gets flail shot or whip shot by the Skewed. Now the shout first from Gladiators, who got a little impatient, but Violet calls for the speed, disengage, and now maybe a re-engage from the Shock. As when the two teams are gapped away from each other, it's Kilo and Happy that can really define these fights with the ranged shots. But for now, the bot is moving a little bit of Gladiators' way. Shock hoping to contest. A lot of focus going into Reiner at this moment. And he gets down to 25% HP. And Kalush is the one that dies first, but either way, both tanks have been removed. And it's only a one-man advantage for Glads, but no supports for the Shock.
Every single kill, Lemon, is a notch more deadliness to these Genjis getting the dash resets. Kevster dare not follow any further, knowing that there are going to be respawns from San Francisco Shock coming out, but that was simply a difference in focus fire right there. Kalush just a touch more damage, unable to use as much of the bot for cover, and I think getting a worse deal when it came to the disruptor shots as well. Happy got a really good one, and that's reflected in his ult charge as well. He's 30% ahead of Kilo. I like maths.
Math. Oh, well, here's that one, the geometry from Happy. So now Shock were kind of hiding into the pack room on the side, and now have to coalesce back on the main street. And as Shock are running, they were getting picked off by Glads, who were trying to cut off their rotations. But Kilo hits that random shot, which gives Shock a chance to have a pretty decent fight. Finn calls for the rally, and then Violet with the sound barrier second, while Gladiators have the support ults, but are choosing not to use it, especially maybe with Kevster gone and Happy not able to convert much with the overclock.
Yeah, I think Gladiators are happy after that sound barrier is forced by Happy's overclock to just back off with both their spot ultimates still available, knowing that now Kevster should be able to freely claim a fight with this blade, whereas Proper's going to run into a lot more trouble from Skewed and Funny Astro. They've got to be careful though. If Skewed here goes for a tempo rally and Proper tries to blade through it, they might end up layering their support ultimates as Funny Astro invests to try and save Skewed and stop it from dying midway through that ultimate.
Now Shock, they have the support ult advantage here. They can last as long as they can through the fight. Kevster uses the blade, he goes through tunnel, forces out the shift jump from Kilo, who gets the last left. What a headshot! It's a zero-man blade from Kevster, but Shock with the 5-on-4, what do they want to do after that? It's the Kaluge rampage right into the sound barrier of Funny Astro. Can Shock even get there to help him out? Well, Proper gets punished on the approach, and here's the re-engage from Glads, who pop both their support ultimates to finish off this fight, and so they shall with a 36-meter lead for Glads. It'll get even bigger.
Reiner there, really smart to allow Kaluge to actually back off and grab the health pack so that Kaluge to actually stagger himself with more health. That's more ult charge and more time that San Francisco have to wait. Also skewed real here of that fight. He actually blocked the incoming rampage with his shield while he was rallying, so he was not an easy target for San Francisco Shock to take down and stop that overhealth from stacking even when Gladiators were antied. Now Kilo needs to go big with the overclock.
Oh god, but he's getting pushed by the supports of Glads. Even Putty Astro is just up there, trying to boop him away. Kilo still lives, all thanks to Violet. And remember, I mean, the coaching staff of Shock were just looking forward to the matchups, of especially how the Lucios of Violet and Funny Astro are enabling their DPS. Works out for Kilo and the friends of the Shock. Kaluge is down, but really Gladiators don't want the smoke anyway, so Shock will hold for now.
No butt scratch gained, however, still a little bit of a premium when it comes to the meterage from the Los Angeles Gladiators. San Francisco Shock will begin their own push here, and yes, Violet once again is getting quite the pace on when it comes to this sound barrier, having let loose his a lot more freely than Funny Astro was, and now Finn in tandem can answer this overclock.
Yeah, overclock, just all focus on the Kaluge. Only some of those shots hit, and I think that was very killable. Meanwhile, Reiner is less healthy than Kaluge, but the rally from Finn was not enough to keep Kaluge going, so you have a tank advantage for Glads, but maybe a DPS gap as Proper gets the dash on the skewed and ends the fight in the way of the Shock, who are down quite significantly when it comes to the push meterage, so we'll see if they can tie it up.
It turns out the tank advantage ain't nothing compared to the proper advantage that San Francisco Shock brought to bear, and this time San Fran didn't overlay their support ultimates as well, so they still have Violet ready to answer any hyper-aggression from the LA Gladiators. This is going to be a fight for the meterage here. They don't want to allow San Francisco Shock to reach that 55-meter checkpoint.
Oh, the blade, the barrier, and everyone from the Shock helping Proper push this bus to its station, but Gladiators sustained through and stole the bot, by the way. Kevster is just escorting the bot the other way, so Shock have to make a decision. Do you win the fight? Do you win the war? What is going on? Proper turns his attention to Kevster, gets him off the bot, but now Shock have to fight their way through this street just to get to the bot to where it was before.
The bot in the middle. That's happy place for Los Angeles Gladiators. They still got the lead. Finn's got no shield. He's going to be a big target.
Kevster wanted the dash reset on the Kilo, but the shell from Kaluge saves him. But as soon as that resource is gone, Kevster pulls out the blade and finishes off all these low targets that had no way to escape. Still 1-1 trade, but without Finn, Shock, just like you see, don't have the healing to keep brawling this.
Proper doing plenty of damage here, though. And now the shout was worn on off Lemon. There is going to be a slow field as Funny Astro goes low.
Yeah, Gladiators were just capping off this fight and needing to invest the overclock on top of the blade. I don't think that was really necessary, but either way. Oh, that was the overclock from Kilo. Either way, Glads are back on the cart with a 10-meter advantage. So it's the Shock that, I mean, this could be going to 5.
I agree, Lemon. Not entirely necessary. Kaluge and Reiner both ready with the rampage. Reiner strikes first and grabs 3. Kaluge waits to answer.
Oh, he's just trying. Kaluge is taking cover around this barricade and waiting for a moment. If he gets back to a healthy amount, he could counter Rampage, but waits too long, and Finn's rally is too late. Maybe they can out-sustain this if Violet gets the sound barrier, but Shock were able to kill quite quickly without Kaluge, so they managed to get the bot back.
Really good patience and covering dancing there from Kaluge, and because he didn't use his rampage as well, Gladiators knew that that was the main tool that Shock wanted to use in order to turn that fight around, so they actually inted in to try and kill Kaluge, and that allowed for those positions to be exploited by Proper, who now has a blade good to go, and Proper has been a menace on this map so far.
Shock have a bit of high ground here to work with. Finn does drop around the corner. Happy gets pulled by the knife, forced the shift jump back, and that could be a window of opportunity for the Shock. And Kalush rampages in. He's got the sound bear from Violet. Proper has more than enough health to keep going with this blade, but Kevster gets 2. It's matched up by Kilo and Finn. You have a 3 versus 3 on the cart, but no healers from the Shock. Finn and Violet are dead, so Gladiator's damage is all permanent, while Funny Astro, all he has to do is speed and enable Kevster, and that's enough for Gladiators to win the fight.
Keeping that Lucio alive, like you said, Lemon, it's the most important thing because San Francisco Shock found themselves on a ticking clock and still didn't manage to outpace the distance that was gained by the Los Angeles Gladiators. We've been stuck in this back and forth stalemate now for about 4 or 5 minutes, with only 2 remaining now, and still San Francisco Shock, they are going to be able to position themselves early enough to deny any push to the Los Angeles Gladiators, but the bot still has a way to go before San Fran can make progress of their own.
Yeah, 55 meters for Glads, and maybe needing ults to get around this bend. It's quite difficult with the high ground advantage that the defenders, or I guess Shock at this point, have. Kilo has a charge up shot, he sees Skewed, but is more aiming towards Kevster and pings him. Oh, he might have even got a body shot, so that kind of alarms Shock to go for a fight while the Gladiators are weak, and they're Shock are converting on all these kills. The Shock are so good at being aware of when they can take the fights, and not only when, but where. Goes out their way, but they still got to get to the 55 meters.
Yeah, Gladiators there because of their disengagement as well. The bot doesn't have far to go, and they should be in good place here for San Francisco Shock to actually start getting that meterage. It would take a right in here from Gladiators to actually get in the way of the bot, but Ryan is down for it, baby.
You know, the shout from both teams comes out, but Reiner's 25% health. Shocker's just gonna dip him quite easily. Kevster goes for the squishies with the blade and converts on 2. Gladiators have the 1-man advantage. A lot of damage now surrounding Kalush, who barely has any cover. Both Brigidas land on the floor, and that guarantees that Finn can't escape. So Glads have bot control again, but Shock have a 1-meter lead.
Skew doing an amazing job of baiting in Finn for that counter bash because they were far more members of Gladiators there to be able to take advantage of Finn being stunned on the floor and start getting that damage. Now, San Francisco Shock, they just about got themselves an advantage in terms of the meterage. Now Gladiators, they have to claim themselves these extra few meters. They have to push even harder. But will they invest in using their support ultimate advantage to do so as we move in towards overtime?
The final fight where if Shock win it, they will take the series, but Glass can force the 5 if they get just a few more meters, so Shock never want to let this cart go, or at least the barricade to move. Here's the blade, though, from Proper, slices down Happy, and Kilo gets the last laugh. 5 on 4 for the Shock, and Skew's rally is just not enough to keep the team going, and the San Francisco Shock have done it in less maps than it usually takes. Overtime goes away, and the San Francisco Shock remain undefeated with a 3-1 win over the Gladiators.
And that was all down as well to Violet getting an amazing disengage with a speed from that sound barrier that Funny Astro brought forth, thinking that this is our advantage, this is our resource, and this is our moment. But before that, the fight where they just about managed to sneak through those last extra couple of meters to get the advantage over LA Gladiators, when for so long on New Queen Street, it was a back and forth decided by centimeters upon centimeters. In the end, San Francisco Shock, they reacted better to the stimuli. They made their disengagement and they flowed like water before bouncing back with a blade that could not be answered.
I mean, every single map, besides Paraíso, was very back and forth between these two teams where, I mean, to be fair, both these teams struggled at the start of this meta. Like, struggle in quotations where Shock lost 2 maps. The only 2 maps they lost were in that first match. It was to the Justice, which they quickly reverse swept, and Shock are just that quick at adapting to the meta. They could put Proper on Tracer, Genji, you name it, he fits the meta, but it's almost like the mirror thing is happening with Glads. But I think it was more the coordination through this meta that Glad struggled with, where now they're 0-3, and now you're wondering, are Glads even going to make it to the Summer Showdown in Toronto to face their rivals to get another tournament win under their belt? It'll come down to the last 3 matches that Glads have, where they have Paris, Atlanta, and Toronto left. So they really got to put in the work in these last matches if they want to go to Toronto.
It's a scary road ahead for our reigning champions. You talked about how variable Proper is when it comes to picking up all these different heroes, but someone who's flexed in this meta as well is our player of the match, going from world-class flex support to world-class Lucio as well. It is Violet, and for me, I really lobbied for Violet to be our player of the match because he was doing such a good job of moderating how aggressive he was in tandem with how defensive he could be as well, and just staying alive in order to control these engagements. Violet has such a good sense of when to engage and when to disengage that he can often force resources from the Los Angeles Gladiators to just be sent into the void.
And as you kind of noted throughout this series, ult generation is a huge win condition. That 5 or 10% makes miles of a difference, where Violet was always ahead in that generation and look good doing it. You know, higher deaths because I think Lucios do have to go for those boops on those high grounds and have to do a bit of scouting and stuff like that, but Violet still had an incredible performance, and we don't give these players of the match often to supports, and Violet definitely deserved it.
Yeah, can often sit on a knife's edge between two DPS, but this time I think that we did experience a little bit of a hard Lucio diff here. Funny Asher is by no means a bad Lucio, but I'm not sure if this particular meta suits his style of hyper-aggressive, frag-heavy Lucio as much as it does the more tactical-brained people like Violet.
Well, we have one more match left in the day. It's Washington Justice versus the Florida Mayhem, but we can't get to that match until we get some interviews and we hear from the desk about their thoughts of this series. It was a banger, so we'll see you guys after the break.
I'm okay. 나이스.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by Upper Deck, the official trading card of the Overwatch League. And by TeamSpeak, the official voice supplier of the Overwatch League.
Welcome to Game Break, everybody. I'm here joined now by Proper from San Francisco Shock. Proper, congratulations on the win. Now, with this win, you guys have successfully, what is it now? 19 wins, 0 losses, tying the Vancouver Titans from the 2019 season. I just gotta ask, like, how are you guys this good? Like, whatever meta it is, whatever you guys have to play, you guys haven't lost a single match. So what sets you guys apart from the rest of the Overwatch League teams? 자, 첫 번째 질문은 이제 오늘 승리로 인해서 드디어 저번 시즌까지 포함해서 19승 무패 라는 엄청난 업적을 이뤄내신 센쇼인데요. 프로포 선수 보시기에는 지금 현재까지 어떤 메타가 오건 어떤 경기든 한 번도 진 적이 없는 건데 어떻게 좀 이렇게 좀 잘할 수 있는 것 같은가요? 좀 다른 팀들과 비교했을 때 뭐가 다른가요? 센쇼은?
일단 저희 팀은 일단 다 피지컬이 많이 좋아가지고 어떤 메타가 와도 그래도 한 중간 정도는 가는 것 같아요. 거기서는 이제 코치님들이랑 감독님이 이제 좀 게임 이해도 같은 거 다 이끌어 올려주셔가지고 가면 갈수록 좀 이제 좀 성장한다는 느낌?
알겠습니다. Alright, so I mean, to start off, our team, San Francisco Shock, all of our players are just mechanically gifted. So whatever meta comes forward, you know, at our worst, it's probably average. We never hit the bottom. So from there, we got great coaches and great coaching staff. So they help us improve from sort of that middle ground all the way up to sort of the best teams or best quality of performance. All right, my second question for you is, I mean, for this match against the Gladiators, you know, despite the 3-1 victory, I do believe that Gladiators put up a really good fight. Was there a certain player from the Gladiators that sort of gave you a hard time during today's match proper? 자, 두 번째 질문은 오늘 경기가 3대1로 끝이 났지만 제가 봤을 때는 글래디도 오늘 굉장히 잘 싸웠다고 봅니다. 이제 프로포 선수 개인적으로 봤을 때 자기 자신한테 좀 제일 경기 도중에 제일 힘들게 했던 선수가 있다면 누가 있을까요?
선수라기보다는 이제 글래디에 아는 코치님이 저랑 전 팀이었거든요. 컨텐에 있을 때. 근데 이제 그 코치님이 제가 좀 잘하는 걸 아니까 좀 의식을 시켰나 봐요. 그냥 프로퍼만 살짝 막아라. 그래서 글래디 5명 선수가 좀 많이 심하게 저만 보더라고요. 그래서 좀 게임이 좀 힘들었어요. 그것 때문에.
Okay. All right. I wasn't necessarily say that it's a player that gave me the hard time. It's actually the coach from the LA Gladiators. There's a coach in the coaching staff that I've known since the Contenders, and he was our coach when I was back in Contenders. So their strategy of sort of focusing me down, make the coach telling their players to make sure to sort of check on proper, and that sort of gave me the hard time because every time I played, there was a lot of times where all of the Gladiators players were sort of focusing me down or looking at me for the most of the time. So that was the major problem for this match. All right, proper. Thank you so much for your time, and again, big congratulations on the win. 자, 이걸로 인터뷰 마치도록 하겠습니다. 프로퍼 선수 감사합니다. Thank you.
Thank you.
The San Francisco Shock get one back after taking an L in the mid-season madness finals. And yes, it's just a regular season match, but it wasn't just any regular season match. It's still a new meta. It's nice to compete with some of your biggest rivals, of course, when it comes to the number 1 and number 2 team in this region. And they took down the Gladiators finally, of course, improving to 19-0 now, regular season match win streak record. Costa, an incredible achievement for this franchise, truly.
It's, you know, Danny, you said this, and you know, Proper spoke to it a little bit. The ability to stay that consistent throughout regular season games. When you're winning this much, it's so easy to get complacent, drop a series here or there. But you know, the San Francisco Shock, even in today's match, they come out, put an absolute clinic of how you should be playing this meta, and you know, they made it. You know, obviously it was competitive, but they made it look easy. They played their game, they went toe to toe, and the Los Angeles Gladiators by no means didn't show up today. Oh, yeah. The addition of Happy, you know, he was making his mark known already, and that gives me more confidence for the Gladiators. But the San Francisco Shock, especially in the West, are the team to beat right now.
Yeah, I mean, the LA Gladiators now with Happy in the lineup. The LA Gladiators struggled last week, coming to week 2. Now you have Happy on your team, Joss. Do you think you saw, like, the LA Gladiators, you saw the potential? Just like, oh yeah, now they have the ingredients. Now they're cooking. Like, this is something they could build on for the rest of the stage.
What is he cooking? What is he cooking? What is he drawing? What is he drinking? I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, it's going to take